So to create some lighting effect, what we want to do is create a brand new layer. So I'll go over to my layer palette and click the new layer icon. I'm just going to double click on layer 5 and call this lighting. And of course we want to make sure that that layer is selected. Again, all these different layers just give us so much control over our image. So with the lighting layer selected, what I want to do is now move over to my paint bucket. I'll click on that. And we haven't been able to, or we haven't needed to change color so far, but we just want to make sure that this is completely black. And with the lighting layer selected and the paint bucket selected, if I click inside the canvas, you can see that we've now filled the entire layer with black completely. Now, that doesn't do us a whole lot of good because now we can't actually see any of the platforms that we created. So we want to go back over to the layer palette, and you'll notice that there is kind of this little tool options down here. And if we click on that, we get this opacity slider. So I'm going to click and drag on this slider, and you can see as I do, we make that layer more transparent. And of course, if we go all the way down to 0, we don't see that layer at all. And if we go to 100%, then that layer is 100% opaque. So for now, we just want to go ahead and turn this down a little bit so we can see a little bit of our background layer. We can turn this all the way back up later if needed. We can kind of adjust it as we need as we go along. So now that we can see our background, now we can make some educated decisions on where we actually want our light sources to be. And I want to make sure that there's a few areas in this level that we can absolutely see. When our character is coming close to these kind of gaps, we want to make sure that our character or our player can definitely see these gaps, so our character can, of course, jump across these gaps. So with the lighting layer selected, what I'm going to do is actually select the eraser tool. This is the first time that we're using that. And you can see we see the size of our cursor, which is about this big. So the default size is fine right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on a certain area. So I'll just click up here. And you can see I've now erased a piece of that layer. So just click there. And then I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm going to move my brush down to the bottom at kind of an angle from that first point, and then click again. And you can see I've now made that ray. Now, I'm just going to undo that for a moment. I can just click and drag with my cursor or my touchpad or my mouse, but you can see unless you're really skilled, you're never going to get a straight line, which is again why I'm clicking once, holding the Shift key, and then clicking a second time. And then what I want to do is these light rays kind of expand outwards, so I want to generally start in the same position. So I'll click again up here. But then now I'm going to kind of go off to the left here a little bit, and we kind of have that cone shape of the light source. So I'll just start a little bit more to the left, make a cone shape that looks like that, and then we can put another point up here, hold the Shift key, and then do something like that. So that's our first large lighting source, and I'm going to just repeat this pattern a few more times. And then we'll do that at different sections in our level. Always kind of fanning that out, making it much wider at the bottom. And you can do this as many times as you like, depends on how much light that you actually want inside your level. And then now I'm going to change my brush size for my eraser. And this works just like we saw with the pencil and the brush. We have these options here. So I'm going to click on that. Open up this dialog, and then of course change this diameter. So by default we had it set to 50. I'm just going to turn this down. That should be good. And then I'm just going to repeat this over some of these dark areas here so we get kind of smaller strands of light. And just makes things a little bit more interesting. So again, really simple process. All we're doing is kind of drawing these little cones. And then you can have fun with this. You don't have to draw these kind of light sources coming from the top here. We can, of course, just kind of create some very weird shapes. So I'll change my diameter of my brush again. If you want, you can kind of just create some strange light source over here for no reason. And then perhaps another one in this area for no reason whatsoever. So we have these kind of nice rays casting down, which make these cones, and then we kind of just have these random blobs of light sitting in other sections of our level. So again, even after we made all those adjustments, if we go back to our layers here and we take a look at this, we can actually take this opacity and turn it back up and down. So you can see how dramatic we can make the level based on this opacity slider for our lighting layer. So I'm just going to kind of bring my level in a little bit like that. And again, it's totally up to your preference on how dark you actually want your levels to be, how dramatic you want it to be. So for me, maybe somewhere in the 70s, 72, 75 should be good. I like it nice and dark like that. But these light sources kind of don't really look like light at this point in time. They really just look like what you've seen me do, which is kind of erase an image. So what we want to do is actually go up to the Filters tab. Again, make sure that you have the right layer selected. It's really easy to select another layer and then apply filters or brush strokes to the wrong layer. So you always want to double check on that. So with the lighting layer selected, I'm going to go up to this Filter tab here, and I'm going to go down to Gaussian Blur. And when I click on that, we get this dialog box. And I'm just going to put this right here inside my image so we can zoom in. You can see how this affects everything. So as I increase this, you can see that all those strands of light are being blurred out. And it's kind of making everything a little bit softer, which is exactly what we want. So again, you can adjust this totally to your preference. No blur, you can see that doesn't look quite realistic. And if you go crazy with the blur, it kind of just squishes everything out. But I'm going to go with something like this. So I still get a few of those strands, which looks good. So I'll click OK. And then what I want to do to finish this up is I'm going to create one more layer. So again, I'll click the new layer icon. And this is layer 6. And I'm just going to rename this white. And you can actually rearrange your layers, so I can drag this below the lighting layer. So I'll just click and drag, and now it's below the lighting layer. And again, I want to grab my paint bucket because I want to fill the entire layer with a color. But instead of black, I'm going to click on this box here, and that's going to open up this color picker. And I'm just going to shift this all the way up to the top corner of this diamond, which gives me a complete white. And then I'll click OK. And you can see with my paint bucket selected, I just go ahead and fill that layer there. We're going to make sure that this white layer is, of course, below our platform layer as well. And now that that white is there, we don't see that checker pattern anymore. And my lighting layer, now that I have that white in there, I'm actually going to turn this, make it a little bit more dramatic and a little bit dark. So again, if you turn it up all the way, you're not really going to see anything, but if we turn it down just enough, then we just start to bring in pieces of our level. So you can see very, very quickly, I was taking the time to explain things here. We just scribbled out some platforms, and we used our pencil to put in some very, very artistic kind of pieces of grass here. And then now we've actually added in these lighting sources. And if you're not 100% happy with your lighting, you can always grab your eraser again, change your eraser size. So I'm just going to change my diameter back down to something smaller. And I'm just going to keep adding in a few more strands of light here. Just exactly the same way I did before. And then again, we're going to go to our filter tab, go down to Gaussian blur as you saw as I did before, and then I can turn that up again as well. And I'll click OK, and you can see that that lighting is even more dramatic. And then the last thing I'm going to do is this light is a little bit white. And in general, this whole level for me is going to be black and white. You can choose some different colors and tones, but let's add a little bit of tone in here. So we're going to go down to that white layer that we created, which was below all the other layers. And then again, we'll go back to our paint bucket and then our color picker. And then I'm just going to make this slightly warmer. So I'm going to take this dial and I can move around this dial, and I'm going to go into kind of this red and orange phase here. And because this is all the way at the top, we're still stuck to white. But if I start to bring this down a little bit, you can see if you're watching this box over here, as I move this around, you can see we can start to choose different colors. So I'm just going to kind of make that, instead of pure white, we're going to make that kind of a gray with a little bit of warmth to it. Again, it all depends on your level. If you want a warm level, you can add a little bit of this orange region, or you can switch this over to kind of this blue region, and then you get something that's a little bit more purple. So we can experiment with that. And then click OK. And then with our paint bucket, dump that in. And now you can see we have those nice darker, bluer tones. And of course, if you wanted to experiment with something warmer, we could shift that back over here and just paint bucket that as well. Make sure that sticks. Click OK. And now we kind of have an orange feel. So depending on the mood, obviously this is kind of a very ominous mood anyways, but depending on the mood, you might want to give it a little bit of blue tone or hot, warmer tones. But I kind of really liked the way things looked with the blue tone, so I'm just going to switch back to that. Click OK, paint bucket, and then give it that nice blue tone. So now we have a very interesting level, and if I wasn't taking the time to explain it and you're just kind of free-forming here, it probably takes less than 2 to 3 minutes to sketch out this entire level with some very, very interesting looks. And then the very last thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a little sign into our level. So I'm going to click New Layer again. And this layer, of course, can be above all the other layers. Or at least below the lighting layer. We'll have our lighting layer as the top one. And I'm going to switch back to my brush. And this time I'm going to switch this to just kind of a regular round tip, which is fine. And let's zoom in onto this platform here. And I'm still on my eraser, or my blue tone, so I'm going to switch this back to black. Click OK. And again, I'm just drawing lines here by clicking, holding the Shift key. Shift, and then you can see that it'll just kind of connect the dots. And then we'll just quickly fill in this sign. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Leave a few pixels there. Almost as if we're putting a few boards there. And then later on you can kind of scribble some words or text onto that sign if you like. So we've pretty much completed our level now, and in the next video we're going to start learning how to slice everything up, which again is why we took the time to make sure that everything was in its own layer. It makes it easy for us to kind of divide things and start slicing up our level.